I mean, let's face it, you know, working with other musicians can be like herding cats. You can think of this video in 3 different ways. One is really to kind of get my own ideas about what I think about all this. 2, a solicitation, because I would really love to know mostly what you guys think about this topic. And 3, we'll come back to 3 later. So the topic is twofold. I was thinking about improvised music versus written music and how that relates. I've kind of done both of those things, studied both of those things, which I'm sure most musicians and people who make music have to some degree. It's an interesting topic to me because it seems to be kind of a sort of a division of, like, on one hand, people are lean more toward composed music, whether it's written out on paper or they produce it in some way that's like, you know, in the computer or however you do it. Or the music is just sort of like you jam it out, you know, and I mean, jazz music in particular has a really high degree of improvised elements in it. But in another way, like all music kind of has that. They say in jazz music, I went to school for jazz music, studying jazz music, and one of the things that you hear a lot is people say, there's all these phrases, they have these phrases, like people will say, you know, they'll say, well, improvisation is spontaneous, real-time composition. And that's kind of true. In a way, that's true. Like, you don't really have an ability to go back and edit it. I mean, maybe in a recording you can, but you just kind of have to wing it. And the skills that you develop under improvisation is about being able to do that in a way that everything that you do is presentable to a level that is at least acceptable, but if not acceptable, you know, really moving, really makes you feel something. And the great jazz improvisers can definitely do that. But then there's a whole school of other improvisation that happens like within classical music and avant-garde music that doesn't really have anything to do with like a jazz idiom. But then there's also, like, you know, just jamming out with your friends, like on rock music in the garage or whatever, you know, like there's definitely a level of improvisation in that kind of way of playing. With rock music and pop music or whatever you want to call that kind of music, I mean, it usually is formed in a way of improvising the parts, but then the parts become solidified often to various degrees. But it's interesting in jazz music where, you know, they say like, another one of these phrases is like the music begins where the page ends, because, you know, like it's usually what they call head charts. So like the melody is written out, let's say it's like a standard 32 bar AABA form. So you have 2 A sections, a contrasting bridge section, and then the last A section, and you play over that form over and over, and the melody is written out over that 32 bar form, let's say. And then when you get to the end of it, after everybody plays the head, the chart all the way down, you start improvising over that same form over and over. And you say like the real music begins where the page ends, after the melody is over, and you just start playing your own improvisation over those changes. And I like that idea because it's like you have two elements here of like both the composed music, like the written music, the music that's kind of somebody sat down with a pencil or paper and a piano or whatever and came up with like, here's the music and I've written it out, and then the musicians can take that and in a way play it however they want. There's still like certain ways that you do it, but it really can vary an extreme amount. And a great example would be like if you listen to Thelonious Monk play a jazz tune. Let's take Thelonious Monk playing Straight No Chaser, and you compare that with like, let's say Keith Jarrett plays Straight No Chaser. I mean, that happens to just be a blues, but like a jazz blues, but I mean, it's really different. And whatever tune it is that Thelonious Monk plays would be very, very different than, say, you know, Art Tatum or Bud Powell or something like that, or Oscar Peterson or whoever. I did this class one time where Benny Golson was teaching, great tenor saxophone player, and he said in the class, you know, like in his conception, like the difference between Miles Davis's playing and Dizzy Gillespie, he said, you know, like if you take like a D7 flat 13 chord, D dominant flat 13 chord, like Dizzy would play all those notes all the way from the bottom all the way up to the flat 13 and land on that and everything in between, whereas Miles would get to that chord and maybe just play the flat 13. And back in the day, people were like, whoa, that you didn't have all the context around it. And it's just a different approach. It's a lot of stuff. So, I mean, people thought maybe that was a wrong note. Like, not just anybody, but like, you know, different musicians who would say, where did he come up with that note? Whereas when Dizzy did it, it made more sense because you had the context around it. Of course, people figured out Miles knew what he was doing. He was good. Anyway, it's some ideas about like how all of this works, and it's made me think about this because as a drummer, I'm really a drummer, that's my instrument. You can't really make music by yourself so much, like full music by yourself, without other musicians. And so I think that's kind of what has really led me to like making my own music. And I love doing that, making music just like with software on the computer, with various equipment, and it can really just be like your own vision of your music and how you do it, and you're not dependent on all of these other factors because, I mean, let's face it, you know, working with other musicians can be like herding cats. It can be a process. And so when you take all of that out of it and you can just do your own thing, it's very empowering or something. It's just fun. It's a lot of fun. But there's something about doing that also leaves something out, I think. Let me see if I can put that a better way. There is an element of making the music just within your own sphere of resources, completely to yourself, that another dimension of the music is not realized. Another dimension of what music can be is not realized. I have come to feel this more strongly going back to listen to some of the recent music that I just released. Where there are other musicians bringing something to the music there. I like both ways, and I absolutely love just making the music myself, producing it myself, and doing this. But these are the questions I want to ask you guys. What do you think about that? What has been your experience in this way? I think most people who make music have at some point played in like at least a rock band or made music in some way with other people. So there's that. Then there's this other element of the whole thing, where I do this kind of day job sort of thing where I go and I record legal proceedings where you put microphones out for everything, and they do these depositions or court hearings or whatever it is, and you record all that. And I was doing this deposition with this attorney, and she said something about how she really wanted to be a singer, but she didn't have a good voice, and she wanted to be creative, but she didn't feel like she was. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of time to go into it. It was just sort of like idle chit-chat there as everything's getting set up. But, you know, I said to her, I was like, with the voice thing, I was like, well, you know, there's always a way. Like, if you don't have a great voice, like, you don't have to let that stop you. There's a lot of singers who don't have a great voice, and I mean, you could say, just off the top of my head, like David Byrne doesn't necessarily have a quote-unquote great voice, but man, so good. Like, what he does is he's found a way to use what he has in a really powerful, personal way that brings something to the music that's great. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a late Dylan. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily say Dylan has a great voice, I don't think, but it is a great voice in a way because he's made it great. He's made it his thing. A lot of singers like that. And so far as, so you can't let that stop you. And then so far as the idea of, you know, oh, I'm not a creative person, that really irks me because it's so not true. It's so not true. And it's interesting where that idea comes from. Because a lot of people feel this way about themselves, and people get here divided into two camps, the creatives and the non-creatives. And it's all bogus. It's, if you have chosen to wear certain clothes, that's a creative act. As, if you haven't read this book here, this book by Rick Rubin, The Creative Act, A Way of Being, it's really great. I put off getting this book. A lot of people recommended this book to me. They were like, oh, you'll love it, you will love it. And I put that off for a long time. I was like, I don't know. Reading about music, if I'm gonna spend my time reading, I felt like I wanted to do something else. But I kept hearing about it, and I broke down and bought it. You can get it almost anywhere. I mean, I think I got this at Target. You can even get it at Target. It's great, pick it up. But one of the things that he says in there is like, he talks about this, if you choose to drive a certain way home, that's a creative act. Like when you say, like, I'm gonna drive the long way or something like that, you're making a creative choice. Like, you could do it another way. You're creating your experience through your choices, which is a creative act. And everyone does that to some degree. So I feel like, the difference between what people say is like, oh, those are creative people, is really just the extent to which two things. Basically, a person wants to indulge their creativity. Like, some people maybe don't give it much thought at all and don't really have any interest in it. Kind of like being an athlete. I think most people could be a pretty decent athlete at some sport or another, but it's really just the extent to which you want to sit down and do the work to get good at doing it, which is not unlike playing a musical instrument at a high level. It really just comes down to the ability. The only ability that you really need is the ability to sit down and practice it for countless painstaking hours. And if you can do that, anyone can do it. The great drummer John Hollenbeck, he's a super great drum set player, plays creative music, but he also studied percussion. He was studying timpani with the great Vic Firth. And Vic Firth, he said to Vic Firth, he was trying to do this really complicated timpani part, and he was getting frustrated. And he said to Vic Firth, kind of jokingly, he said, this would be a lot easier if I were a natural talent. And he said, he kind of meant it in a way, but it was joking. And he said, Vic Firth just laughed and said, listen, you start practicing 12 hours a day, every day for the next 2 years, and you watch how quickly you become a natural talent. And I really believe that the only gift that a person needs to be able to be good at something like that is just the ability to spend countless hours doing it without giving up. And that's kind of true about just the whole realm of creativity. If you're a person that just has no interest in doing any of that, then it's going to be difficult to be any good at it. And maybe in some sense that would be a quote-unquote non-creative person, but I still believe that you're making decisions all the time that are creative, and therefore the other element of that would just be that if you do have those kind of creativity inclinations, the degree to which you give yourself permission is a huge factor of it. Like this attorney who was like, oh, right away, right out of the gate, she's saying like, oh, I'm not a creative person, I'm not. But then she, in the same breath, she's saying, I wish I could be a singer, or I wish I could do this. And it's like, there is some point where most people have this creativity beaten out of them. And I really believe that's true. There was an artist, I was listening to an interview by a visual artist, I can't remember his name, but he was talking about like how, you know, almost all kids love to do art. And like they love to draw and everything. And then there's a point where most kids stop doing that. And he said that point is right around about the same time of when people learn to write. Because now the mark making has to mean something. Now it can be evaluated as correct or incorrect or good or bad. It can be graded, and it takes on a whole other kind of context of like it being correct or not. And art's not really like that. And it is an interesting point of how we all seem to like to make art at a certain early point, and then we stop. Almost everybody stops. And the only difference would be that between a quote-unquote artist, and I'm not talking about making money on it, I'm just talking about doing it because you love to do it. It's interesting how most people like to do that at a certain point and then stop doing that. And the only real difference there would be if you don't, you know, stop. If you give yourself permission to keep going. And anyway, so I said this video is about 3 things, and one is just to formulate my own thoughts about it. So maybe it's kind of rambly and everything, but I'm thinking it through. I just have a few rough notes here about things that I thought about, and then the second part is a solicitation to you guys, because part of my own figuring out what I think about it, like this Rick Rubin book was really great, and helped me think a lot about it. I'd like to know what you guys think. Leave it in the comments. I'll try to respond. But the third part is an advertisement. And the advertisement is for my latest album called Saints. And this is really what got me thinking about all of this just here today, because I was talking to my friend Rob Alley, who plays trumpet on this album, and he teaches a great class at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, at the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa, the Roll Tide one. He teaches a class called Improvised Live, and it's not in the music department, it's in the honors department, so he's teaching non-musicians, and it kind of addresses a lot of these topics, and these are very high achieving students there in the honors department, and it's interesting some of the conversations and topics that come up from a lot of students who are pursuing fields that you wouldn't necessarily call creative, and like right away so much of this creativity, quote unquote, has sort of been excised from their ways of thinking. And so it's a pretty cool class that he teaches there. But he was playing on this and I was listening to it, and so I wrote all the music, and I wrote it out in like this jazz way of like the head charts in the very loose way. And then my friend Rob Alley and Steve Lewis on guitar and Karl Kaminski on bass, and it was just really great to go back to that music and hear how much they are bringing to it. And it's a really special thing when musicians come together and create music together. It is like magic. So anyway, let me know what you guys think, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell for notifications. And if you found this content really useful, consider joining me over at my Patreon. Your support there is most appreciated. I've got some new content coming out there, some free sample packs and things like this. All you have to do is sign up. You don't have to do anything else. Okay, I think that about does it for this one. Pick up Saints. It's available on Bandcamp with cassette or just a digital download. And as always, thanks for watching.